The Planet 4 was a quiet world at the edge of known space. Its people there had lived there in peace for more than 300 years. They were tall and thin with skin of pale blue water and eyes so large they could see in the light. Their sun was weak and gave little warmth, but they had learned to love their cool and shadowed world. They were not fighters, they had never been fighters. In all their long history they had never built a weapon or raised an army. They were healers and thinkers and dreamers. Their greatest achievement was a technology that could repair damaged cells and cure diseases that other species thought impossible to treat. Sick beings came from across the galaxy to seek medicine. They helped them all and asked for little in return. Elder was the leader of the main colony. He was old even by standards, with more than 200 years behind him. His blue skin had faded to almost white, and his movements were slow, but his mind was still sharp. He had spent his whole life studying medicine and teaching young the art of healing. He had never imagined that his peaceful world would know violence. The Armada came without warning on a morning that had started like any other. Was in his study reviewing research reports when his assistant ran in with terror on her face. She could barely speak. She pointed at the window and looked up to see the sky filled with dark shapes, ships, dozens of ships blocking out what little light their dim sun provided. They were known throughout the galaxy as raiders and conquerors. They were large reptilian beings with thick scales and cold yellow eyes. They felt no pity and showed no mercy. They took what they wanted and destroyed what they could not take. Other species avoided them. Treaties meant nothing to them, laws meant nothing. Only strength mattered to them, and they had no strength. The first bombs fell on the medical district. Watched from his window as buildings that had stood for centuries crumbled into dust and fire. He heard screaming in the streets. He saw running in panic with nowhere to go and nowhere to hide. The ground forces landed next. Soldiers in heavy armor marched through the city shooting anyone who did not surrender fast enough. Knew what they wanted. They wanted the regeneration technology. They wanted to take it for themselves and use it to make their warriors stronger and harder to kill. They would tear apart every laboratory and torture every scientist until they got what they came for. And when they were done, they would kill everyone anyway, because that was what they did. The old made his way through the burning streets to the communication center. Bodies lay on the ground. Some were still alive and reaching out for help but could not stop. He had to reach the transmitter. It was the only chance his people had. The communication center was still standing, but the staff had fled. Was alone in the large room filled with screens and controls. His hands shook as he activated the emergency beacon. This beacon connected to the Galactic Council humanitarian network. It was designed to call for help in times of crisis. Had never used it before, he had never needed to. He pressed the button and began to speak. His voice cracked with fear and exhaustion, but he forced himself to continue. This is for calling anyone who can hear. We are under attack. They have invaded our world. We have no military. We have no weapons. We have no way to defend ourselves. We are a medical research colony. We are healers. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need help. We need medical assistance. We need evacuation ships. Our people are dying. Our children are dying. Please, someone help us. He repeated the message again and again. Outside the window, he could see soldiers getting closer. Explosions lit up the sky. The smell of smoke filled the air. Kept talking into the transmitter, hoping that somewhere in the vast galaxy someone was listening. The message traveled than light through subspace relays. It bounced from station to station, crossing distances that would take normal ships years to travel. It reached hundreds of worlds and thousands of listening posts. It was heard by species that had the power to help. It was heard by governments with fleets of warships. It was heard by the Galactic Council itself. Most of them did nothing. They received the message and they filed reports. They held meetings and discussed options. They calculated risks and weighed political consequences. They were dangerous. Interfering might start a larger war. They were far away and had little to offer in return for help. One by one, the species of the galaxy decided that 4 was not worth the trouble. They sent formal expressions of concern. They drafted statements condemning the violence. They did not send ships. But the message also reached a small human outpost at the very edge of explored space. The outpost was called Sentinel Station, and it was staffed by a skeleton crew of 12 people. Most of them were asleep when the message arrived. Only one person was on duty in the communications room. Her name was Morgan. She was 26 years old with red hair and freckles across her nose. She had joined the United Earth Navy because she wanted to see the stars and help people. She had been assigned to Sentinel Station because someone had to be, and she was too new to argue. It was boring work. Nothing ever happened out here. Until tonight. Heard the message come through and she sat up straight in her chair. She listened to the alien voice begging for help. She heard the explosions in the background. She heard the fear and the desperation. She heard a child screaming somewhere in the distance. She was supposed to log the message and forward it to her supervisor. Protocol said she could not escalate emergency communications without approval. Her supervisor would not be awake for another 6 hours. By then it might be too late. By then they might all be dead. Thought about the rules. She thought about her career. She thought about what might happen if she made the wrong choice. Then she thought about that child screaming. She opened a direct channel to Admiral Vincent Gray, commander of the 7th Fleet. It was the middle of the night, and admirals did not like to be woken up by junior officers, did not care. She sent the message and waited. Admiral Gray answered in less than a minute. His face appeared on her screen, looking tired but alert. He was 63 years old with grey hair and deep lines around his eyes. He had been a soldier for 40 years, and he had seen more death than any person should have to see. "What is it?" he asked. Sent him the recording. She watched his face as he listened. She saw something change in his eyes, something hard and cold and determined. When the recording ended, the Admiral asked one question. "How far?" Checked her calculations. 18 hours at maximum speed, sir. Admiral Gray slowly, his jaw tightened and his hands clenched into fists. "Wake the fleet." Admiral Vincent Gray stood on the bridge of his flagship, the USS Defiance. The ship was enormous. It stretched nearly from bow to stern and carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. It was not built for exploration or diplomacy. It was built for war. Around the Defiance, 16 other warships powered up their engines. Destroyers and cruisers and frigates all coming to life in the darkness of space. Lights flickered on across their hulls. Weapons systems activated. Shields with energy. In less than an hour, the entire 7th Fleet was ready to move. Gray watched through the main view screen as his fleet assembled. He had commanded these ships for 7 years. He knew every captain and every crew. He had trained with them and fought with them and buried some of them. They were more than soldiers to him. They were family. Commander Lisa Vance approached him with it in her hand. She was his second in command and had been for 5 years. She was 41 years old with short brown hair and a thin scar across her chin. She had earned that scar in a battle she never talked about. Gray trusted her more than anyone else in the fleet. "Sir, I have the tactical assessment," she said. Her voice was calm and professional, but Gray could see the tension in her shoulders. "They have approximately 40 ships in orbit around 4. Ground forces estimated at 10,000 soldiers. They are using standard suppression tactics, bombing civilian areas, targeting hospitals and schools, breaking the will to resist." Gray studied the numbers on the 40 enemy ships against 17 of his own. The odds were not good. There were experienced fighters with powerful weapons and no fear of death. Many commanders would have looked at these numbers and decided to wait for reinforcements. Gray was not many commanders. "What is our advantage?" he asked. Lisa almost smiled. "We are human, sir." Gray, that would have to be enough. Prepare the fleet for combat jump, all hands to battle stations. The order went out across 17 ships. Alarms sounded in every corridor and every room. Crews rushed to their positions with the speed that came from years of training. Weapons were loaded and checked. Shields were calibrated. Fighter pilots ran to their ships and climbed into cockpits that felt like second homes. In the engine room of the Defiance, chief engineer Danny Park watched the power readings climb higher and higher. He was 52 years old and had been an engineer since he was 18. He had served on 9 different ships and seen 3 wars. He had never seen a fleet mobilize this fast. His assistant Maria Santos stood beside him watching the same readings. She was young, only 23. This was her first real deployment and she did not fully understand what was happening. "We are going to help some aliens we have never met?" she asked. "That is correct," Danny replied without looking away from his screens. "Why?" Danny thought about the question. He had asked himself the same thing when he first joined the Navy. He had learned the answer over many years and many battles. "Because they asked," he said simply. Maria frowned. "But we have no treaty with them, no alliance. They have nothing to offer us. Why would we risk our lives for strangers?" Danny finally looked at her. His eyes were kind but serious. "Because that is what humans do. We help people who need help. We do not ask what we will get in return. We do not calculate the value of a life. When someone is in trouble, we go. That is who we are." Maria was quiet for a moment, then she she did not fully understand, but she was beginning to. On the bridge, Admiral Gray addressed his fleet through the communication system. His voice reached every ship and every crew member. "This is Admiral Gray. In a few minutes we will jump to a planet called 4. The people there are under attack by they sent a distress call asking for medical assistance. They asked for doctors and evacuation ships. They did not ask for warships. They did not ask for soldiers. But that is what they are getting." He paused and looked around his own bridge. Every face was turned toward him. Every eye was focused and ready. "They are not our allies. We have no treaty with them. Most of you have never heard of them before tonight. None of that matters. What matters is that innocent people are dying and we have the power to stop it. That is enough. That has always been enough." He straightened his shoulders and his voice grew harder. "They will not expect us. They think no one cares about a small colony on the edge of nowhere. They think they can murder and steal without consequence. They are wrong. We will show them what happens when they attack the helpless. We will show them what humans are made of. And when we are done, the galaxy will know that there is no corner of space dark enough to hide those who prey on the innocent." Across the fleet, crews cheered. The sound echoed through metal corridors and filled cockpits and engine rooms. These men and women had trained for years waiting for a mission that mattered. Now they had won. "All ships report ready for jump," Lisa announced. "Gray, execute." The fleet jumped. Space bent around them as they accelerated beyond the speed of light. Stars stretched into lines of white fire. The ships crossed distances that should have taken months in mere seconds. It was a journey through the impossible made possible by human ingenuity and determination. 18 hours, that was how long the journey would take. 18 hours of waiting and thinking about what lay ahead. Some soldiers slept because they knew they would need their strength. Others checked their weapons again and again. Some wrote messages to families they might never see again. Some prayed to gods they were not sure existed. In his quarters, Admiral Gray sat alone looking at a photograph. It showed a young girl with his eyes and her mother's smile, his daughter. She had been 16 when pirates attacked the transport ship she was traveling on. Gray had been 2 systems away commanding a fleet that arrived too late to save her. He had never forgiven himself. Now somewhere across the stars, another father was watching his children die. Another parent was helpless against an enemy they could not fight. Gray could not change the past. He could not bring his daughter back, but he could make sure that someone else's children survived. He put the photograph away and stood up. There was work to do. In the medical bay, Dr. Cole prepared her team. She was 38 years old and had been a combat medic for 15 years. She had treated wounds that would make most people sick just to look at. She had saved lives in conditions that should have made saving lives impossible. She was very good at her job. "We do not know what biology looks like," she told her team. "We will have to adapt, bring everything, assume nothing. Our job is to keep people alive until we can figure out the right way to treat them." Her team, they were scared. She could see it in their eyes, but they were also ready. The hours passed slowly. The fleet flew on through the darkness between stars, and ahead of them a dying world waited for salvation that it did not dare to hope for. Warlord stood in the command center of his flagship watching his soldiers drag prisoners across the burning streets below. The invasion was going exactly as planned. The weak blue creatures had no weapons and no will to fight. They surrendered or they died. Most of them surrendered. That was good. Dead scientists could not share their secrets. Was old for a nearly 90 years of conquest had made him rich and powerful. His scales were dark green, almost black, and covered with scars from battles he had won. He feared nothing in the galaxy. He had crushed species far stronger than these pathetic healers. This mission would add another trophy to his collection. His tactical officer approached with confusion on his reptilian face. "Warlord, we are detecting an anomaly at the edge of the system." "What kind of anomaly?" "Ships, sir, 17 of them. They just emerged from hyperspace." Turned to look at the display screen. 17 small dots had appeared where there had been nothing before. They were moving toward the planet at high speed. "Identify them." The tactical officer worked his controls. "Unknown configuration, Warlord. No match in our databases. They appear to be broadcasting a message." "Let me hear it." The speakers crackled and then a voice filled the room. It spoke in the common galactic language, but the accent was strange. The words were calm and measured, but there was something beneath them, something hard like stone. "Forces, this is Admiral Vincent Gray of the United Earth Navy. You are engaged in an unprovoked attack on a civilian population. You have one opportunity to withdraw your forces from this system. If you do not begin immediate evacuation within the next 5 minutes, we will open fire. There will be no second warning." Silence fell over the command center. The officers looked at each other with uncertainty. They had heard of humans, a young species from a small blue world on the far side of the galaxy. They were newcomers to space. They had no empire. They had no reputation for military strength. Laughed. The sound was harsh and grating like metal scraping against stone. "Humans, they think 17 ships can threaten 40. They are either brave or stupid, probably both." He turned to his communications officer. "Tell them we decline their generous offer, then destroy them." The fleet moved to intercept the approaching human vessels. 40 warships spread out in an attack formation designed to overwhelm smaller forces. They had used this tactic 100 times before. It always worked. It did not work today. The human fighters launched first, small fast ships piloted by men and women who had spent years training for exactly this moment. They flew in tight formations, moving with precision that they had never seen before. Lieutenant Jake led the first squadron straight into the heart of the enemy fleet. "All wings form up on me," he called through his radio. "We hit them hard and we hit them fast. No mercy for murderers." His squadron dove toward the nearest cruiser. The enemy ship tried to track them, but they were too quick. Jake fired his missiles and watched them streak toward the target. 2 hit the engine section, 1 hit the weapons array. The cruiser began to spin out of control, fire pouring from its wounds. "Splash 1, Jake reported, moving to secondary targets. Around him, other pilots were doing the same. Human fighters danced between ships, firing and dodging and firing again. They tried to respond, but their weapons were too slow. By the time they aimed at a human fighter, it was already somewhere else. Then the larger human ships arrived. The USS Defiance opened fire with its main batteries. Beams of focused energy lanced across the darkness of space and slammed into shields. The shields held for almost 3 seconds, then they collapsed. The beams cut through the hull beneath like a knife through paper. Commander Lisa Vance coordinated the attack from her station on the bridge. She watched the tactical display and issued orders with calm efficiency. "Hammer Squadron, focus fire on the cruiser at bearing 270. Strike Squadron, cover our right flank. I want overlapping fields of fire. Do not let them regroup." The human ships moved like a single organism. Each one knew its role and executed it perfectly. They had trained together for years. They had run simulations of this exact scenario 1,000 times. Now all that practice paid off. They fought back. They were not cowards and their weapons were powerful. The human destroyer Resolute took a direct hit that tore through 3 decks. Fires burned throughout the ship. Crew members died at their stations, but the ship kept fighting. Captain Nick Palmer stood on the bridge of the Resolute, surrounded by smoke and sparks. Blood ran down his face from a cut on his forehead, but he did not seem to notice. "Damage report," he demanded. "Decks 7 through 9 are gone, sir. Engines at 60%, weapons still online." "Then keep firing. We are not done yet." The Resolute continued to pour fire into the enemy fleet. Other damaged human ships did the same. They fought through pain and fear and loss because that was what they had signed up for. That was what it meant to be human. In space there is no sound. The battle was fought in perfect silence except for the voices crackling over radio frequencies. Orders were given, targets were called, ships exploded into balls of fire that quickly faded to nothing in the cold vacuum. Warlord watched his fleet being destroyed and he could not understand what was happening. His ships outnumbered the humans more than 2 to 1. His warriors were experienced veterans. This should have been an easy victory. But the humans would not stop. Every time he thought he had one of their ships in his sights, it somehow escaped. Every time his own ships tried to coordinate, they were picked apart by precise concentrated fire. The humans fought like demons. They fought like they had nothing to lose. "Warlord," his tactical officer said with fear in his voice, "we have lost 26 ships. The remaining 14 are requesting permission to withdraw." Slammed his fist against his command chair. The metal bent under the force of the blow. He wanted to order his ships to keep fighting. He wanted to destroy these arrogant humans and prove that they were still the strongest force in the galaxy. But he was not a fool. He knew when a battle was lost. "All ships retreat, maximum speed." The surviving vessels turned and ran. They accelerated toward the edge of the system, hopping to escape into hyperspace before the humans could catch them. Admiral Gray watched them flee. His face showed no satisfaction. His voice showed no mercy. "Do not let them escape." The human fleet pursued. Their ships were and their pilots were better. One by one, the fleeing vessels were caught and destroyed. Some tried to surrender at the end. The humans accepted their surrender and took them prisoner. Others fought to the last. They died fighting. Within 90 minutes of the first shot being fired, not a single ship remained operational in the system. The ground forces saw what had happened to their fleet. They saw the human warships descending through the atmosphere. They threw down their weapons and raised their hands. The battle was over. On the surface of the planet, Elder emerged from the ruins of the communication center. He had survived. Somehow he had survived. Around him, his city still burned, but the explosions had stopped. The shooting had stopped. He looked up at the sky and saw human shuttles descending through the smoke. He had asked for doctors and evacuation ships. He had asked for medical assistance. Instead, he had received warships and warriors. The first shuttle landed in the central square. The door opened and a human woman stepped out. She was not carrying a weapon, she was carrying a medical kit. "I am Dr. Cole," she said through her translator. "We brought combat medics and surgical teams. Where are your wounded?" Stared at her, he could not find words. His mind could not process what had happened. These humans had crossed the galaxy to save strangers. They had destroyed an entire fleet for people they had never met. Finally, he managed to speak. His voice was barely a whisper. "Why did you come?" Dr. Cole looked at him with genuine confusion, as if the question made no sense at all. "You asked for help." The news of the Battle of Four spread across the galaxy than light itself. Every species with access to communication networks heard about what had happened. A small human fleet had crossed vast distances to defend a world they had no connection to. They had destroyed a force more than twice their size. They had asked for nothing in return. Some species did not believe the reports at first. They thought it must be propaganda or exaggeration. Humans were a young species with limited resources. They had no reason to risk their ships and their people for strangers on the other side of the galaxy. It made no sense. But the evidence was undeniable. Footage of the battle was analyzed and survivors from both sides confirmed the details. The impossible had happened. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session to discuss the implications. The Council was the closest thing the galaxy had to a governing body. Representatives from more than 300 species gathered in the Great Chamber on the neutral world of. They came to debate and argue and decide what this human intervention meant for the balance of power. Ambassador represented humanity at the council. He was 54 years old with grey hair and tired eyes that had seen too much. Before becoming a diplomat, he had been a soldier. He had lost his left arm in combat and the prosthetic replacement was obvious to anyone who looked. He did not try to hide it. He considered it a reminder of what service truly cost. The chamber was enormous. Seats rose in tiers around a central platform where speakers addressed the assembly. Hundreds of alien faces looked down at as he took his place. Some were curious, some were hostile, some were simply afraid. "The council recognizes the human ambassador," announced the presiding delegate. She was from the collective of. Her body was tall and thin with multiple limbs and compound eyes that reflected the light like jewels. Stood and faced the assembly. He did not fidget or show nervousness. He had addressed worse audiences under worse conditions. "Distinguished delegates, I am here to address the concerns raised regarding humanity's intervention at Four. Some of you have suggested that our actions were provocative. Some have called them aggressive. Some have said we destabilized galactic peace by interfering in the affairs of another species. I would like to offer a different perspective." He paused and let his eyes sweep across the chamber. He made sure to look at as many faces as he could. The sent a distress call. They asked for help. Every species in this chamber received that call. Every one of you had ships that could have responded. Every one of you had the military strength to challenge the. None of you did anything. The chamber stirred. Delegates shifted in their seats and murmured to each other, did not stop. They asked for medical assistance. They asked for evacuation ships. They asked for anyone to save their children from being murdered in the streets. And every species in this chamber performed calculations. You weighed the costs and the benefits. You considered the political implications. You drafted statements expressing concern, and while you debated the died. His voice grew harder, the chamber grew quieter. Humanity did not perform calculations. We heard the call and we responded. We did not ask what they could offer us. We did not wonder if saving them would benefit our interests. We simply went, because that is what decent beings do when others are in danger. A delegate from the Dominion rose from his seat. He was large even for his species, with scales the of dried blood and eyes that held no warmth. "The Dominion demands compensation for the destruction of our fleet. The humans had no legal authority to interfere in our territorial expansion. Four was not a human world. There were not human allies. This was an unprovoked act of aggression." Turned to face him directly. He did not flinch from those cold yellow eyes. "The Dominion attacked a world. You murdered civilians. You bombed hospitals and schools. You killed children who had done nothing to threaten you. Your fleet was destroyed because it refused to withdraw when given the opportunity. Humanity owes you nothing." "This is an act of war," the delegate growled. "Then declare war." The chamber fell completely silent. Every eye was on. His voice remained calm, but there was something beneath it now, something that made even the most powerful delegates uneasy. "Humanity has been fighting since before we left we fought each other for thousands of years. We fought our environment. We fought diseases and disasters and extinction itself. War is not something we seek, but it is not something we fear either. If the Dominion wishes to test our resolve, you are welcome to try, but I promise you this, you will not enjoy the lesson we teach you." The delegate stared at him for a long moment, then slowly he sat down. He did not speak again for the rest of the session. After the formal meeting ended, several ambassadors approached in the corridors outside the chamber. Most of them wanted to discuss trade agreements or mutual treaties. Humanity had suddenly become very interesting to species that had barely noticed them before. One visitor was different. She was named Selene. She was young by the standards of her species, with skin that still held its deep blue and eyes that glistened with unshed tears. "Ambassador," she said, her voice trembled, but she forced herself to continue. "I do not know how to thank you. My people owe humanity a debt we can never repay. You saved us when no one else would. You came when everyone else turned away." Looked at her with kindness in his tired eyes. "There is no debt. We did not save your people to put you in our obligation. We saved them because they needed saving. But we must do something. We must find some way to show our gratitude." Thought for a moment, then he placed his human hand gently on her thin shoulder. "Help someone else. When you find another species in trouble and you have the power to help them, do so. Do not ask what you will get in return. Do not calculate whether it benefits you. Just help. That is all we ask." Selene looked at him with wonder in her large eyes. She had studied humans from a distance. She had read reports about their strange customs and their violent history. She had not understood them. Now she was beginning to. "We will," she said. "I promise we will." Across the galaxy, other species watched and wondered. The humans were strange. They did not behave like rational actors their own interests. They took risks that made no sense. They sacrificed their own resources for beings who could offer nothing in return. Some species thought this made humanity weak. They were wrong. Some species thought this made humanity dangerous. They were closer to the truth. Because a species that would fight for strangers would certainly fight for friends. A species that would cross the galaxy to save children they had never met would never abandon those they cared about. A species that measured its strength not by what it took, but by what it gave was not a species to be underestimated. The galaxy was beginning to learn what humanity already knew. Compassion was not the opposite of strength. It was the highest expression of it. The Dominion never declared war on humanity. After the disaster at 4, they retreated to their core systems and stopped expanding. For the first time in centuries, they stayed within their own borders. Other aggressive species took notice. The message was clear: attack the helpless and the humans might come. The humans might come even if they had no reason to. The humans might come simply because someone asked. Some species criticized humanity for this approach. They called it reckless and unsustainable. They said humans could not save everyone. They said humanity would make too many enemies and stretch itself too thin. Eventually the humans would fall because no species could maintain such idealistic in a cruel galaxy. The critics were still waiting for humanity to fall. Admiral Vincent Gray retired from active service at the age of 68. His body was tired and his old wounds ached when the weather changed, but his mind was still sharp and his spirit was unbroken. He spent his final years teaching at the Naval Academy, his experiences with young officers who would one day command ships of their own. Students often asked him about 4. They wanted to know what had made him decide to intervene. They wanted to understand the calculations he had made and the strategies he had considered. His answer was always the same. "We did what anyone should have done. The fact that no one else did says more about them than it does about us. When people are dying and you can stop it, you stop it. That is not strategy. That is not calculation. That is just being human." Commander Lisa Vance took command of the Defiance after Gray retired. She led the fleet through 3 more humanitarian interventions over the following years. She never lost a ship. Her crews loved her because she never asked them to do anything she would not do herself. She treated every mission as sacred and every life as precious. When asked about her philosophy of command, she would say that strength without compassion was just brutality. Power without purpose was just destruction. The goal was not to be feared. The goal was to be worthy of the trust that others placed in you. Dr. Cole remained on 4 for 2 years after the battle. She helped to rebuild their medical infrastructure from the ground up. She trained local doctors in human techniques and learned methods in return. She established clinics in the areas that had been most damaged by the attack. She also delivered more than 100 Barbies during her time on the planet, children who might never have been born if they had succeeded. She held each one in her arms and wondered what they would grow up to become. She hoped they would remember the lesson that humanity had tried to teach. When she finally returned to Earth, she brought with her a gift from the people. They gave humanity the complete database of their cellular regeneration technology. No conditions, no payment required. They gave it freely to the species that had saved them freely. Human scientists spent years studying the technology. They adapted it and improved it and combined it with their own medical knowledge. Within a decade, human lifespans had increased by 30 years. Diseases that had killed millions became curable. The gift that humanity received for an act of simple kindness changed human civilization forever. Morgan was promoted 3 times in the years after 4. She eventually became the director of the Humanitarian Response Network, an organization dedicated to monitoring distress signals across the galaxy and coordinating rescue efforts. Under her leadership, the network saved more than 2 million lives. She never forgot that night at Sentinel Station when she had broken protocol to wake an admiral. She never forgot the sound of that child screaming in the background of the transmission. Every time she authorized a rescue mission, she thought about that moment. She thought about how easy it would have been to follow the rules and do nothing. She thought about how many people would have died if she had made that choice. One decision, one person choosing to act when acting was hard, that was all it took to change everything. They built a monument in the central square of their capital city. It stood where the first human shuttle had landed on the day of the rescue. The monument depicted a human hand reaching down to lift up a child. The hand was strong and scarred but gentle. The child was reaching up with trust in its eyes. At the base of the monument, an inscription was carved in both human and languages. They expected medical aid. They received warships. They learned that humanity brings both because humanity does not separate the will to heal from the will to protect. To be human is to do both always for anyone who asks. Visitors came from across the galaxy to see the monument. Some were curious about the humans who had done this impossible thing. Some were skeptical and wanted to see the evidence for themselves. Some were leaders of other species wondering if they could learn to be more like these strange beings from a small blue world. The monument became a symbol of something larger than one battle or one rescue. It became a symbol of what was possible when beings chose compassion over calculation. It became proof that strength and kindness were not opposites but partners. Years later, when historians tried to identify the moment when humanity became a major galactic power, many pointed to military victories or technological achievements. They pointed to the expansion of human territory or the signing of important treaties. But others argued that the real turning point was simpler. It was a young communications officer deciding that protocol mattered less than people. It was an old admiral waking his fleet for strangers. It was a doctor stepping off a shuttle with a medical kit instead of a weapon. It was a species proving that compassion and strength could exist in the same heart. The galaxy was vast and often cruel. There were species that conquered for power and species that hid from danger and species that calculated every action based on what they could gain. But as long as humans traveled among the stars, there would always be someone willing to answer when the helpless called for aid. There would always be ships ready to fly to the rescue of strangers. That was the human way. On a quiet evening years after the battle, Admiral Gray sat on the porch of his home on Earth watching the sun set over the mountains. He was old now. His hair had gone completely white and his hands shook when he lifted his cup of tea, but his eyes were still clear and his mind was still sharp. His granddaughter sat beside him. She was 12 years old and full of questions about the galaxy and the wars he had fought. She wanted to know everything about For and Thee and why humans did the things they did. "Grandpa," she asked, "why did you go so far to help people you did not know?" Gray looked at her for a long moment. He saw his daughter in her face, the daughter he had lost so many years ago, the daughter he had not been able to save. "Because someone had to," he said finally. "Because they were afraid and alone and no one else was coming. Because the only thing necessary for evil to win is for good people to do nothing. And we are not nothing, we are human, we help." His granddaughter thought about this, then she slowly, "I want to help too." Gray smiled and put his arm around her shoulders. "You will," he said, "you will." And somewhere across the galaxy, a species was in trouble. Somewhere a distress call was being sent into the darkness, hoping that someone would hear. Somewhere a child was crying for help that might never come. But it would come, because somewhere a human was listening. And humans always answered.